So I've spent around a month with both of Samsung's flagships, the Galaxy S8 and its larger sibling, the S8 Plus. In today's video, let's see how they fared. But before we do, if this is your first time here, or in case you just can't remember, my name's Ash, you're watching C4E Tech, and this is our full review of the Samsung Galaxy S8 and the Galaxy S8 Plus. So let's get to it. First off, let's start with what makes the S8 and the S8 Plus special, that infinity display. So while the S8 and S8 Plus come with 5.8 and 6.2 inch displays respectively, these are not your regular displays. The 18.5:9 aspect ratio means the displays are longer and narrower, leading to easier usage in hand. At the launch, I was kinda curious about how this will play out. Huge displays on phones, but both phones, even the larger S8 Plus, doesn't really feel awkward. The S8 is actually usable single-handed most times, except for when reaching across to that notification shade. Given the notification badges that Google's bringing with Android O, it should be even more single-hand usage friendly going forwards. Now, while I mentioned let's start with the display, we've just been talking about the form factor. So let's get back to the display, the tech underneath. This display itself is magnificent. It's arguably the best display on a smartphone today. Given the new aspect ratio, the resolution has changed a bit. It's Quad HD Plus, that's 1440 by 2960 pixels. If you feel that's overkill, Samsung does give you options to switch to lower resolutions. The tech at play here is Super AMOLED. That means super deep inky blacks, great color reproduction, again with options to tone it down. There is support for HDR video, and given that this display is still curved, all the edge functionality from previous generations along with some tweaks are present here. Now, given the infinity display, Samsung had to change the regular key layout and go with on-screen keys instead. The home key is not just an on-screen key, but is a pressure-sensitive key with a pressure sensor buried underneath this display. This means you can use it no matter what app you're in. Hell, you can even use it to wake the device. Talking about waking the S8, the Super AMOLED display here can be always on, and in my time with the S8, I found it very helpful. Now, with the infinity display, it also posed Samsung engineers another problem: where to put that fingerprint scanner. Well, Samsung handled the keys issue with grace. The fingerprint scanner, not so much. It's located to the back of the device and is quite difficult to hit when using the phone one-handed, especially with the S8 Plus. I found myself using the iris scanner a lot more. I mean, the fingerprint scanner is not bad. It is quite fast and accurate. The iris scanner is, again, I had no issues with it. I found it surprisingly convenient to use, even more so given that the fingerprint scanner wasn't the easiest to hit. Of course, it was also extremely useful when I had to access, say, my secure folder where I could store any private information, or for Samsung Pay. Now, Samsung Pay is yet another feature that makes the S8 stand out. It's not exclusive to the S8, but when you compare it with other flagships at this price segment, this is something unique to Samsung. The fact that you can use it at any place where a regular credit card is accepted makes it super useful. Once I was done testing the S8 and I had to move on to the next phone, that's when I realized for the most part I wasn't even carrying my wallet on me while I was using the S8. Now, it's not just the display. The build is equally good. We've got curved 3D Gorilla Glass 5 to the front and back. The key placements are quite the standard affair, but there are two negatives here. One, the back remains a fingerprint magnet. I mean, this footage was shot mere minutes after the unboxing, and you can see how many fingerprints it is. I mean, the phone's already big, but it's a glass pack, not much you can do about it. Now, the second issue, that's something I find a little harder to forgive. The placement, the fact that a Bixby key exists. Now, Bixby is Samsung's AI assistant, and Samsung's actually gone ahead and allocated a dedicated key for it. While it was a fun novelty act for a while, it started growing old quite quick. And the fact that Samsung doesn't want us to remap that button either, voluntarily fixing an option to remap it just mere days after launch, that kind of left a bad taste in the mouth. Now, barring the times I accidentally pressed it, which happened far too often, I never really used it more than the few times that I did for initial testing. Anyway, minor nitpicking apart, let's now move on to the camera is. The S8 features a marginally improved sensor to the back. Just like its predecessor, it's still a 12 megapixel sensor with a wide f1.7 aperture and support for dual pixel autofocus and optical image stabilization. Now, given that the S7 featured an excellent camera, and taking into account the fact Samsung's optimized the software aspect of things here, the S8 delivers on the camera front. Under good lighting conditions, the color reproduction's great with a bit of a saturation boost. The dynamic range was also excellent. Given the wider aperture, the depth of field is quite shallow. Now, this might have been a negative if not for the autofocus that was extremely good. The dual pixel autofocus is very quick to focus and it's also very accurate. So I loved shooting macro with this phone. Now, given this wide aperture and the presence of optical image stabilization, the image quality under low light was extremely good as well. The S8 usually hit 1/10th of a second for low light and at times even dropped down to 1/8th or 1/4th of a second exposure. Now, unlike other phones that we've seen in the past, this is a case of Samsung trusting the optical image stabilization and their processing to handle the shake that results from longer exposure times. So this means the ISO levels are not being cranked up and that results in a much cleaner image even under low light. Now, if that's not enough for you, there's a full-fledged manual mode present. So if you say get a tripod and want to shoot, you can increase the exposure even more, tone down the ISO even more and get overall much better and cleaner shots. Talking about the manual mode, it is also present for video and that's how I've been able to get shots like these. In case you were wondering, all the outdoor footage that you've been seeing on this review video, they've all been shot at 1080p 60 fps with the Galaxy S8. Of course, for the sake of this video, I have been using a Xeon Smooth Q gimbal, but even handheld like this shot here, this was shot at 4K 30 fps and downscaled, shot entirely handheld. Even here, the footage is quite stable. There's a lot of detail and the dynamic range is excellent. The selfie camera has received a boost too. It's now an 8 megapixel shooter with autofocus and an f1.7 aperture. The detail's good, so are the colors and dynamic range. Good job, Samsung. Now, all this would be for naught if the S8 didn't have the hardware chops to back it up. Samsung, as always, is selling two variants of the S8, one with the Snapdragon 835 and another with the Exynos 8895. Both variants are coupled with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of onboard storage. And this variant that you're seeing me use in this video is the Exynos 8895 one. Out of the box, we get Nougat with Samsung Experience on top, and the software here is quite good too. The powerful hardware coupled with the optimized software results in an extremely smooth user experience overall. And Android Nougat means there is support for features like Quick Switch and multi-window built into Android now, so you can take advantage of all that horsepower that Samsung's got. Samsung's own extra functionality like the quick shortcuts or themes support add to the experience. Samsung has also added a crop and force full screen option to make sure you don't get black bars while viewing content, and it worked well for the most part. I found it very helpful. Now, no matter what we threw at the S8, it handled it with ease. In fact, the hardware inside is powerful enough that you could buy a DeX and get a DeX desktop experience with the S8. And the performance here when I used it was far better than what I expected from a smartphone. Well, yeah, the 4 gigs of RAM meant some tabs reloaded constantly, but even with multiple windows open, the powerful chip underneath kept things chugging along quite nicely. Now remember, both the Snapdragon 835 and the Exynos 8895 were built on the 10nm manufacturing process. So though the S8 and S8 Plus sport 3000 and 3500 mAh batteries respectively, which compared to other phones might not sound like much, the battery life was actually quite good. While it's not gonna beat a budget beast like the Lenovo P2 or even the Redmi Note 4, getting through a day on a single charge even with moderate to intensive usage posed no issues. It is worth mentioning that the S8 Plus does do about 10% better than the regular S8, and the battery life on both phones go up by about 10% with the always-on functionality turned off. Even if you did run out of juice, the adaptive fast charger means you get to top up the battery real fast. And there's even support for wireless and fast wireless charging built in, all while remaining IP68 water and dust resistant. Now, the S8 and S8 Plus are priced at 58 and 65,000 rupees respectively. While it's true that you can get 70 to 80% of this performance at half the price, Samsung has truly added some functionality that makes the S8 stand out and, dare I say, worth the high asking price. While the Infinity display, the excellent camera, and the all-glass build with the IP68 certification are noticeable USPs. Samsung's attention to detail with the little things like support for wireless charging, Samsung Pay, dual SIMs or microSD, a leaner, cleaner user interface, all these make the S8 stand out from the herd and make it a very compelling phone to buy. If you are willing to buy a phone in this price segment, the S8 and the S8 Plus are the ones you need to look at. That's just my 2 cents. So that's it for my review of the S8 and S8 Plus. Do you agree with what I've had to say in this video? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you do want to pick up either of these phones, I will be leaving direct links in the description below. Use them, it helps the channel out. If you hated this video for some reason, go ahead, give it a big huge thumbs down. But if you did like it, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. If you have already subscribed, hit that bell icon down below to get notified each time a new video goes live here on C4eTech. And that's it for now. Thanks a lot for watching. Till next time, this here is Ash. You've been watching C4eTech and I'm signing off for now. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.